Um, Thank you, Julian. Can everyone hear me at the back? Oh, no, still loading. But you can hear me, at least. No, let's carry on. Okay, hi, everyone. My name is Neil Lawrence, and I'm chair of tonight's Audit and Governance Committee meeting. I'm going to rattle through the usual notices before we dive into the agenda. So do bear with me. So welcome, everyone, to tonight's meeting. This is indeed a public meeting. Members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note that the meeting is now being recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you're deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds in the Guildhall, we must evacuate immediately. Please don't spend time collecting belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you've left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So thanks again for bearing with me. Number one on the agenda is appointment of substitutes. Do we have any substitutes at tonight's meeting?
Yes, we do, Chair. That's a blank seat, it's not me. But Karen Holmes is here for Jessie Jagger.
I thought it was someone different in the meeting. I just could put my finger on it. Jessie's not here. Good to see you, Karen. Thank you. Number two on the agenda, declarations of interest. No? I've not been notified of any public participation requests. No? Okay, so we're straight on to agenda item number 4, which is the minutes of the meeting on the 11th of February. I'll take them by page in terms of any issues arising and points of accuracy. So page 1, the minutes. Councillor Barnes?
In the minutes from the previous, which is 61, March 2026, climate adaptation. Is there anything new on that, or was it deep dive? I couldn't see it on the agenda.
Yeah, that's. I was going to mention that in a moment. So hold fire on that one, and I'll come to that one. Yeah.
Thank you.
But no, thank you for that. Anything else in regards to page 1 on the minutes of the 11th of Feb meeting? No. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4, last one. No, so those are going to be accepted as an accurate record of the last meeting. I'll sign those off. Thank you, Julian. I presume it was yourself who put those all together. An often thankless task I found doing the minutes, but I'm thanking you. Grand. Thank you all. Now, on the agenda that is available to the public as well, we have the internal audit progress report, but I would like to request the permission of the committee to reorder the agenda so that officers who are not normally obliged to attend the Audit and Governance Committee do not have to stay for the full duration. I think it would be polite if we could rearrange the order so that they don't have to stay till the end. And their participation in the meeting relates to agenda item number 10, which is, as Councillor Barnes has already alluded to, the risk management deep dive into climate adaptation. Now, this is, first of all, can I ask your permission to bump that agenda item to now so that we can hear, see the presentation, and then we will come to the official agenda item 5. Is that okay? Fantastic. Now, as it says on the Worcester City Council website, this is not for public consumption. And I actually am going to be very pedantic and read the explanation on the website, because people might be watching going, hang on, I've just strapped in for this meeting and now you're telling me I can't watch the rest of it. This is exempt, not for publication. This is agenda item 10 as it currently stands, because the items contain information related to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including this authority holding that information. So I'm just reading what's on the Worcester City Council website. So what we're now going to do is go straight to agenda item 10, risk management deep dive climate adaptation, which is a presentation from officers and a question and answer session with councillors. It's not going to be recorded. Sorry everyone watching the meeting. we're going to be about half an hour in a private session, and then we'll go back into public session. Thank you all. We'll just wait for
longer than anticipated.
Okay, we all good? Thank you all. I hope that was useful. And just to make the point, within the minutes of the previous meeting, there's a schedule for future deep dive presentations. So there's one in June, September, December and March next year. So we'll have at least 4 more deep dive presentations on obviously different themes. So returning to the agenda, the next item is the Internal Audit Progress Report. This is a report to be noted, and I believe the item's been led by Chris Green. So over to Chris.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual internal audit progress report. It's covered at pages 5 to 24 on your agenda packs. We're still making good progress. The service remains fully staffed, and by the 20th of February, we delivered 256 days against the full year plan of 275, and so we will achieve the full year plan of 275 days. We've issued final reports for 8 areas, 4 since the last meeting in December. They relate to budget setting and monitoring, which was given substantial assurance, a top grade. Contract management, which was reasonable assurance. We did find generally sound controls, but some scope to improve paperwork in some areas, mainly around signed contracts, which we found some examples of them missing, or extensions which hadn't been recorded on the register. However, that is already being addressed through a new contracts register online system that's going in very shortly. And I'm aware that staff will be trained on how to use that very soon as well. The Local Government Transparency Code audit resulted in also reasonable assurance. Again, the Council is mostly in compliance with the requirements. There are a few areas where data hadn't been published, but again, management is addressing that, and I can confirm that, having been copied into various emails on that. And then finally, on follow-up of recommendations, substantial assurance on that, on the basis that 88% of agreed actions have been implemented by officers on time. There is one action outstanding that relates to staff training on fraud, bribery and corruption. Management are currently appraising options for that, and that may be that an e-learning module is launched early in the new year, but it is expected to be addressed in the next few months. We've got field work ongoing for the remaining 5 audits, but work is well progressed on all of those, and reports will be issued in April. I was asked at the briefing meeting to update members with progress with the fleet management and fuel usage audits. So the field work for those is close to completion. Should be at least reasonable assurance. I can't provide a guarantee because the work isn't quite finished. And the arrangements for ensuring driver compliance are generally fine, along with the procurement activity. Fuel usage is appropriately monitored and excess usage is followed up by management. The only issue of any significance really so far is that vehicles are being disposed of via auction houses, which in itself isn't an issue. But at the moment, that's with the involvement of only the fleet and compliance manager. There's no indication of any wrongdoing whatsoever, but we do recommend an additional layer of control, both to protect officers and ensure that best value is being attained when disposing of vehicles. And senior management have already agreed to sign off on those disposals going forward. The annual internal audit opinion will be presented at the next meeting in June as planned, and at this stage, given all the audits have resulted in either reasonable assurance or substantial assurance, the annual report should be reflecting positively on the organisation. And at this stage, there are no findings from our work which in my view impact significantly on the Council's annual governance statement for the current financial year. So in conclusion, making decent progress. Members are asked to note the report and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Is that working still? Yep. Thank you very much, Chris, and yeah, thanks to you and your team for all the work on progress so far with the audit. Opening it up to the floor for questions, comments about the progress report. So this is a progress report on the plan that was agreed at Audit Committee June last year. So any questions, comments on the progress report? We've got Councillor Mace. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Mace.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the, thank you for the report. I'm glad everything appears to be in good order and management are picking up their action, so that's all good. Now, my only question was around the overdue action. I appreciate that the software has been looked at to do the training. Can we get like a commitment that by the next meeting that will be cleared up? That's in June. Will that be all right to get in the minutes, just so we can follow up on that next time?
If that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, can I just jump in to clarify, Councillor Mace, is about the fraud, bribery and corruption, that training that Chris mentioned, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've already seen correspondence where the head of finance is looking at delivering something, so we'll definitely, might not have got to everybody by then, but we'll have something in place that we can start to be rolled out.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, I'll be honest, that was the only thing that I'd mentioned in the pre-meet for this committee, but that's been cleared up tonight. Any other comments, questions about the progress report? If not, then I presume we'll all note it, which we've already done because we've discussed it. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Bear with me, everyone. So the next item is about audit again, clearly, because we're in an audit committee meeting, but it's about next year. So the internal audit plan for 26-27. And this isn't about noting, it's about approving the plan. And with or without amendments. I know Councillor Mace has already got in touch about that, but let me hand back over to Chris and then we'll discuss any further potential amendments and or comments. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the internal audit plan for 2026-27, which is being presented, as Neil said, for approval with or without amendments, and it sets out pages 25 to 32 in the agenda pack. As required by global internal auditing standards, it's a risk-based plan. It considers the adequacy of the Council's risk management, governance and internal control framework. We do have a list of all the areas we could potentially audit. We reviewed that, considering coverage and the results of audits over the last 4 years, identifying those areas which we consider to be of greatest risk and where there hasn't been recent coverage. Consulted with Rachel as the Section 151 officer and other senior managers at the Council, and the proposed plan is designed to support the organisation in achieving its objectives. The planned resource allocation is 280 days, and those with eagle eyes will spot that that's a small 5 days increase on the previous year. And just to be clear about that, we don't have target numbers. So we set out actually what the work is required. 280 is the number that we came up with. So it is very similar to last year. Just a couple of things to highlight. Firstly, you might spot that there's 25 days of allocated time for assurance and consultancy work around local government reorganisation. Now that does represent a bit of an unknown at the moment, but should become clearer as the new financial year progresses. But we have been developing a framework for potential internal audit work over the next 3 years, and I'll be presenting that to the Shared Service Board on Thursday for consideration and discussion, and then hopefully share that with members as we progress through the new financial year. The plan isn't set in stone. It can and will be amended in the year as emerging risks are identified or existing risks become more elevated. And as is already the case, this committee is the gatekeeper and will be asked to approve any significant changes during the course of the year. We define significant as anything which changes resource allocations by more than 5 days. So we're allowed to do very little tweaks to allocations, but if it's anything over 5 days, it comes here for ratification. Other than that, members are asked to approve the plan with or without amendments, and I'm happy to take comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm going to jump in, abuse my privilege before I open it up for a debate. I just wondered if you could sort of row back a bit, probably only for my benefit, just to elaborate a bit on what global internal audit standards are. This is from the government, and apologies for my ignorance, but you know, we've been mandated to have this sort of audit standard. Can you just explain what global internal audit standards is in a political context? Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll have a go anyway at putting it into English. So the first thing is that they supersede what was called the public sector internal audit standards, which applied here in the UK. So anyone who's around before might remember we had an external quality assessment carried out in 2024, and that was against the public sector internal audit standards. So some of the key requirements of those were the requirement for risk-based internal auditing. And if I go back many, many years, it used to be all about the systems and compliance. Now it's about actually supporting an organisation to achieve its objectives through assurance and consultancy work. Now that still is the case with the global standards, but the difference with the global standards is in the word, and they were developed by the Institute of Internal Auditors, who are based in America. And they apply to the whole world, to all organisations, irrespective of the nature of that organisation. And the idea was to improve consistency of audit provision, internal audit provision across the entire world. Now, the mandatory, as I say, we have considered implications for us here in terms of our service. But because we were largely compliant with the public sector audit standards anyway, we're also largely compliant with the global standards. And the next item on the agenda, where we're talking about strategy and charter and mandate, that's one of the missing links, if you like, in terms of demonstrating compliance with those standards. They also include requirements in terms of skills and expertise. So we can't just appoint anybody in the team. You have to have things like continuing professional development in place. So you might have heard me talk before about the training provision and development opportunities for staff. You know, not only is that a positive thing anyway, but it's also a requirement of the standards. They talk about requirements for the chief auditor to be suitably qualified and experienced, and of course I'd like to think that I am. They also talk about having suitable arrangements for what's called managing the audit activity. What that basically means is that behind the scenes, behind everything that you see, we've got systems and processes in place. So where we're reporting about things like performance, productivity information, or implementation of recommendations, you'd rightly expect us to have records that sit behind all that, that if someone wants to look at it, they can see and see that it all stacks up. We have to have arrangements in place for safeguarding independence and sound ethics and so on, and objectivity, for example. So not only is that documented in an internal audit charter, we need to make that live and breathe through how we manage ourselves as a service. So I hope that's sort of in English, and I hope it's useful.
I feel that was a very proud justification of the whole audit remit, so as well as answering my question, so thank you so very much. I'm glad I asked it. So yes, getting back to the agenda item, albeit I am glad I asked that question. I've got Councillor Mace. Did I see Councillor Holmes as well? 1, 2. Okay, Councillor Mace.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the plan, Chris. Overall, I'm happy with that. I think my only question was around Category 1 hazards in private rental accommodation. So we've got a couple of items that are dealing with housing. But I was watching Communities last week, and Neil had raised that we had only identified, I think, 6 instances of Category 1 hazards in the private rental sector. And the private sector stock survey report, which is one of my favourite reports, highlighted that an estimate that private rentals homes, there's probably over 1,000 such homes with Category 1 hazards in them. So it feels like you should be able to put a blindfold on and throw a dart and hit a private sector housing a rental with a Category 1 hazard in it. So I'm wondering if there's something that internal audit could look at to see if we are correctly identifying these things, or whether the methodology of the report has massively overestimated it, because it seems to be a disconnect between the number of hazards we find and the number of hazards that we're estimating are in the city. So I'm wondering if there's some piece of work to be done there. And perhaps it's too early yet, but it would be good to review the implementation of the enforcement of the new Renters' Rights Act powers potentially next year rather than this year, but something to think about for the next year's plan.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the advanced side of the question. I'm perfectly happy for us to incorporate a piece of work around the Category 1s within 2026-27. If you flagged it as a live issue and risk, then I think it's appropriate for us to look into that. We'll need to deal with the practicalities of whether we bolt it onto one of the 2 housing audits that are already there, or as a separate piece of work, but we can pick that up. I don't think it will take very much time. I think we can do that within the existing budgets. The second point, I'm happy to incorporate that as a forward planning note to revisit when we come to planning for our audit programme for 2027.
Thank you.
Just to come back to Councillor Holmes, so it's as straightforward as that. So there's been 2 suggestions from Councillor Mace about within the next audit plan, we look at Category 1 notices, how we are identifying them, and how the Renters' Rights Act has been implemented over the next 12 months. It's as straightforward as you saying, yep, great. It doesn't need to go to committee for hands in the air, does it? Is it? Because I asked the question because you talked about number of days per audit item, and you're saying it's fairly straightforward, but then you talked about a 5-day threshold, and if it goes beyond 5 days, then it does need to go to a vote. You're confident that those 2 tasks that Councillor Mace has suggested become part of the new audit plan would not take beyond 5 days, and therefore would not have to be voted on here?
Yeah, I think so at this stage. I can't be 100% certain, but if we did, if when we scoped out the work, we thought it was going to be a bigger piece of work and we couldn't deliver the whole audit plan as it is and take that work on as well, then I'd come back to you. But I don't think on that basis it's something you necessarily need to vote on. The 2027-28 point is just for, at this stage it's noting. It will be in the minutes, I assume, so therefore it will be picked up. I will take that away and we'll have a forward planning note on our files, and we'll come back to it later in 26-27.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Mace, you done there? Yep, thank you. Councillor Holmes, then Councillor Sarah.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, actually, it was renters' rights that I wanted to raise, but with it coming in in 3 stages, are you going to be instituting a periodic check through the auditing process that people are being trained properly, understanding and implementing it correctly? But also, given that's already been raised, my consideration would be empty homes. It doesn't seem to be pushed very much through the city, and I think it is something that should be addressed a lot more firmly, that houses are sitting empty while people are looking for homes. So I would
like to know if that gets addressed or has been addressed in audits and what the findings were.
Chris, I can't remember all of the detail, but I know the leader gave a response about empty homes and some of the powers that the city council has had and where we have used them in the last sort of 12 months. So I will dig that out and liaise with Chris just to see whether there is anything there. But I got the feeling from that point that we are, you know, there's limited powers that we do have, and then there's also just the timeliness of when they can be implemented and, you know, challenged. You know, there was CPO that was mentioned and things like that. So I think it has been addressed, but I will double check what's on there.
Thanks, Rachel, and through you, Chair. I think because we've got a housing allocations review as well, I think as part of that we can look at is the council exercising its powers where appropriate in relation to empty homes.
Thank you. Councillor Saver.
Thank you, Chair. I'd had a follow-up from what Councillor Mace has just quoted from the Communities Committee, and I hope it might be relevant anyway, unless anybody tells me differently. As I remember it from that committee, the number of 1,000 is sort of it's quite a ballpark figure, and no one really knows if that's a real figure. And the council can't just bowl up and knock on the door and say, you're a private rented place, I'm going to inspect you. There has to be somebody complain. So I think that is one reason why the figures are like they are. And I don't know whether your audit would therefore look at, is the council doing enough to make people aware that they can complain and that sort of thing? Is that the thing you're thinking about when you ask that?
I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. It's making so, because I watched that meeting. That's why I mentioned it being an estimate. It's like, if that's the number we're getting in the report that we're estimating, and then thinking about, is that the numbers we should be finding? Is that number, like, what's the error bars on that number? Is it somewhere between 900 and 1100, for example, or is it somewhere between 0 and 3000, and we don't really know? You know, it's very difficult to make decisions on that number if it's that kind of wide error bar on it. So it's a question of just looking at, when we're looking at this, when we're getting 6, is that a fair reflection of the work we're doing and the work we should be doing, or is there something that we should be doing more to find more? And so it's just checking that our processes are correct, that we're identifying all the ones we should, and whether there's, you know, if we should have identified 10 or 20 or 100, then hopefully our internal audit will pick that up.
Just not sure that's within our gift, that's all.
I suppose that, you know, the first thing would be to establish how it is managed. So we can certainly look at the complaints process from A to B. Absolutely, that's fairly standard audit fare. But really, it's a question of, you know, what are the council's obligations, and checking that the council is following those obligations. But I don't know how they're being managed at the moment, so that will be what the audit will also do, is establish how they are and then take a view from there.
Thank you. Yeah, just to again use my privilege to come in there. I'd hear both points of view. I think yes, it's about being reactive, because people have to report. But then I also see the merits of including this within the remit of the audit team to see how potentially proactive we can be. But I do absolutely hear what you're saying. It's how do you knock on doors and say, you know, how's your house looking today? I do get that, but I don't think there's any harm, because not least because Chris said it's not a huge piece of work. If you're saying it's 30 days in the audit calendar, then I'd be a bit reluctant to say yes. But as he's so confident that it's not a huge addition to what they already have on their workload, I think it's just worth having a little bit of an assess and then see how much we can do. But I do take your point, it's reacting to complaints. Yeah. Well, you haven't got the resources to do that, I know that. Does anyone else? Councillor Barnes?
Thank you. We've moved from UK standards to these new global standards. Do you have any concerns that with the current incumbent of the White House, that actually standards may start to slip due to that influence? And are you satisfied that the future direction of audit is going to be protected?
First thing to say is I hadn't considered that, but I can understand you raising it. I'm not really concerned at this stage, to be honest. I think there are probably other matters going on, global events that are probably taking, how can I put it, are more forefront in the President's mind than dare I say, the global internal audit standards. And given, I'd also say that given that it took the Institute of Internal Audit something like 3 to 4 years to actually come up with these standards, including consultation process across the world with, audit providers and so on and so forth, no changes would likely to go through and be ratified in a short period of time anyway. And I don't see why, unless you want to do away with the requirement to have audit full stop, then I'm not sure what the benefit would be of sort of reopening that, to be honest.
Yeah, you might bin them tomorrow. You might scrap audit. So it's a fair question. Fair question. Any other questions or indeed amendments to the audit plan for 26-27? No. So thank you again, Chris, for presenting the plan and everyone for their comments. So we do have a job to approve it or not. Options are given towards the end of the report. Can I see indications that you approve of the plan, internal audit plan for the next year? Fantastic. Thank you very much all. Thanks again, Chris. And I believe we've got one more item on the agenda. Indeed, and Chris has already mentioned it, the internal audit strategy, charter and mandate. Again, we have a task to approve or indeed not, and I'll hand back over to Chris.
Thank you again, Chair. So this is on page 33 onwards in your agenda packs, and linking back to the previous item, this is a requirement of the new global internal audit standards for us to have an internal audit strategy and a charter which incorporates a mandate statement. So I'll start with the strategy, and there's nothing particularly radical in this or earth-shattering in itself, but it's helpful in the sense that it does show members how we operate and how we plan to build on the service improvements that have been made over the last few years. I'd just like you to draw your attention to the SWOT analysis and the areas of focus going forward, so that you get some sense of where we want to go in terms of service enhancement and improvement over the next couple of years. So firstly, in relation to data analytics, there's potential scope there to do more auditing by exceptions and potentially more frequent as part of business as usual in the background. And I'm thinking particularly in relation to the sorts of finance system audits that we undertake, so that would be more in the background as BAU rather than a dedicated standalone piece of audit work. One significant change that will take effect from April and all new audits that we do for 2026-27 is around design and prioritisation of the testing that we do. So at the moment we'll identify the risks for the area that we're looking at, and then we'll tend to have a blanket coverage of all of those risks. But actually there'll be some areas of risk that are greater within a subject area than others. So what we'll be doing going forward is focusing on those most significant risks. And the idea behind that is that you can then increase coverage. So actually get broader coverage of more areas rather than full coverage of a smaller number of areas. And the findings and recommendations that go in our reports will therefore be more focused on matters of significance. And I do think that's important. There will be fewer recommendations that we make as a result, Some of the suggestions that we make will be made more informally, such as by email, but particularly with officers likely to be under so much pressure and pulled in so many different directions as we start to go towards local government reorganisation. It's important for everybody, and including members and officers, to focus on the areas of greatest risk, so that you get the most impact from the resources that you've got. We'll also continue focusing on continual professional development in the context of LGR, so supporting the staff within the team to get to where they want to be when LGR actually kicks in. So we're supporting staff through, we've currently got a member of staff doing the Institute of Risk Management, we've got 2 members of the team doing the Institute of Internal Audit certification, and we've got a member of staff doing AAT, and they're all at different stage of their studies. We've also this year had external training in ethics and on effective risk-based auditing. We've provided an external provider, and also awareness on climate change, how to do climate change and environmental audits. And actually that does put us ahead of the game, because a lot of internal audit services at the moment in local government are not doing climate and environmental related audits. But given that our mission is about supporting the organisation to achieve its objectives, and given that the organisation has climate and environmental related objectives, my view is we should be doing work in that area, and so we are. The other thing to emphasise is again that supporting environment in terms of staff development and training is, in my view, helping us to retain the officers that we've got. We don't rest on our laurels, but I do see that as being particularly important at the current time and in the current climate. We'll also continue to focus on performance management, on efficient and effective delivery. So members will be familiar through the progress reports and the annual reports that there is a focus on performance data within there. I do think the biggest wins have already been realised, but also the focus on CPD, use of analytics and focus on areas of significance will, in my view, take us up to the next level. Moving on to the charter, we already have a charter in place, but it hadn't been reviewed and updated for a little while. So, with the new standards requiring a statement of a mandate, we've taken the opportunity to review and update it and incorporate that mandate statement. The charter covers basically why we're here, the scope of what we do, rights of access, your role as the audit committee, my role and the role of senior management in relation to internal audit, the steps that we have in place to ensure our independence, how we do our planning and reporting, arrangements for quality assurance and improvement, how we apply the Nolan principles of public life, and finally, how our arrangements for demonstrating integrity, objectivity, competency, due professional care and confidentiality. Section 3 of the Charter sets out the new mandate that's required by the global standards, and in essence it says, if we ask you to open the books, you've got to open them. Now, in my career, I've never actually had to actually make a request of that nature, but it's important to have it there as a mandate, and to be absolutely clear, that's not an issue here at Worcester City Council. It's just a requirement of the standards to have it in there. Members are asked to approve the strategy, the charter and the mandate, and happy to take comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. So yeah, I'm going to open it up to the floor, obviously, but just before I do that, I just thought it'd be worthwhile just outlining that the recommendations are one line, and that the internal audit strategy, charter and mandate be approved, but that's spread across, as Chris just mentioned, 2 appendices, Appendix 1 and Appendix 2. So we're discussing both at the same time, if that's okay. So yeah, I could open up to the floor. Councillor Sarah has indicated. Councillor Mace. Yeah, Councillor Sarah.
Thank you. So the strategy itself has that, I expect it's been reviewed and accepted by all of the senior management team here, and every heads of departments know that you're there and this is what you're going to do with their areas.
I'm not going to go as far as heads of departments, but we will share it with them. It's been more of a sort of internalised liaising with Section 151 officers and the rest of the team. To be honest, a lot of the content really is mandated by the standards. We've got to demonstrate within the strategy that we're covering certain areas. But in what I've set out tonight, I wanted to focus on what we're actually doing to make the service better, rather than sort of taking you through all the things that we do, because that's kind of a given really. It's what we're going to do to make the service better going forward, and for me that's the strategic direction element.
Okay, yeah.
But that would still require some sort of buy-in, I guess, eventually.
Yes, but to be honest, that's an ongoing BAU in the way that we, that we have a relationship with service managers across the organisation. So I sit on the corporate management team, attend that regularly, and I'll give updates there. Because you've approved the internal audit plan tonight, that will then be shared with the service managers and heads of service at CMT. And then there'll be a dialogue that takes place around actually timings of when we'll carry out the work. We don't just kind of turn up and say, okay, open up the books and we're going to do an audit. We do our work in a way which is designed to minimise disruption to services. And because we're part of that shared service, we can move resources around and put more in one council at a point in time and then move it somewhere else. So we're generally well placed to take on board requests for different timings. But the dialogue side of it, that's there all the time.
Thank you. Councillor Mace.
Thank you. I was noting in the charter that the 5 district councils in Worcestershire that are part of the shared service are the same 5 district councils that chose North and South. So obviously our shared service for internal audit is helping people make very good decisions. So that's a very good point. One thing I wanted to raise was page 48 of the pack, which is page 6 of the internal audit charter, in the section 5.3, which says senior management supports the internal audit service to perform its role and mandate by, and then on the third bullet point says ensuring appropriate action is taken on recommendations and advice of internal audit. Management must accept and implement the advice and recommendations, or formally reject accepting responsibility and accountability for doing so. And I've read that and I thought, surely our management probably doesn't formally reject accepting responsibility and accountability for doing so. Perhaps it should rather be that management formally rejects the advice and recommendations and accepts responsibility and accountability for doing so in terms of rejecting that advice. So is that fair? And then there was a small number of other typographical changes I sent over, which I'm not going to go through to save boring everyone. But does that seem like a fair change to make?
Yes, so firstly, thanks for giving me advice sight of your comments. I'm happy to make that tweak. I don't know that it requires a formal ratification anywhere. I think it can be done behind the scenes. And also the other minor points that you made, I'm happy to make those changes. Just on the actual sentences themselves, I just wanted to say that it's incredibly rare for management to refuse to accept the recommendations of internal audit. What you might get is a dialogue about actually what is the best way to address the risk or the issue that's been identified, and that's perfectly normal and reasonable, and we do take a pragmatic approach to these things, the key thing being that the risk or the issue is then subsequently managed. If for any reason that's not the case, and in my view there's at least a medium level of risk, then I would report it here as well. So it's not the case that it would just happen behind the scenes and you never get to hear about it. You would hear about it too, because it's important that if that situation arose, that you're aware of the level of risk that is being accepted by management. But as I say, it doesn't, it hasn't happened here and it doesn't happen here.
Thank you. I've also had sight of Councillor Mace's suggestions for amendments. Can I just assure committee, if it's okay, Councillor Mace, that we are talking commas, that's the level. I have to work with this chap. He's very good at his job, very good at his job. But yeah, so be assured that subsequent changes are really, really minor. We're not trying to bypass this committee by changing the document. No, I'm glad someone's so hawkeye in these things. We are an audit committee after all. So, any further comments, suggestions, amendments? No. So, thanks again, Chris. I'm just going to go back to the recommendation. Bear with. So yeah, like I said, it's one liner, albeit spread across 2 documents. So the recommendation is that the committee approves the internal audit strategy, charter and mandate. We'll take those 3 all in one go. All those in favour of approving all 3? Perfect. Thank you. It's unanimous. Thank you. Thanks again, Chris. Thank you. And I've not been notified of any items for any other business, but Councillor Barnes shot her hand up straight away. Carry on.
Thank you, Chair. It's really in relation to the exempt item we discussed earlier. Will we be seeing that slide deck in some format and minutes? I know that they will be still exempt, but it might be useful for us to have some kind of sight of them.
Can I just ask you a question? But minutes for the presentation, the discussion that we had, yeah. I'm sure the presentation can be circulated, but...
Yeah, so yeah, I can gladly circulate the slides. Minutes, we don't normally record verbatim questions and answers in our minutes. So if there are any specific action points, yeah, I will record those.
Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a fair point, because it was quite a meaty discussion, so yeah. No AOB? I think that's us. So thank you so much for your time, everyone. Have a safe journey home. Thank you.